Good morning. I'm Monica Corda. I'm the Director of Business Development here at the Tech Collective. And we're happy to have you here for this morning's presentation on how to do it all with WordPress. Just a little bit on the Tech Collective. We are Rhode Island's Technology Association. So we're member driven. Our members tell us what they need and what they want, and then we bring them those presentations. And just as a special note, we are right in the middle of accepting applications for our Tech 10 awards. So these are awards that we run with Rhode Island Monthly, and it's to honor the best and the brightest people who are going above and beyond what they're expected to. And certainly through COVID, we've seen technology advance in so many ways, and people really spending the time to make new apps or to work on business to change it so it better completes that need for the company. So I will post a link for Tech 10 applications in the chat box. If there's someone that you think in your organization really deserves to be honored, they do not have to be a member of the Tech Collective. We're just looking to honor IT professionals here. So for now, for what you came for, we have Matt Smith from Delin Design. He is a website designer who has used WordPress for many years and would like to bring to you the tips and the tricks that he has used for himself as well as for his clients. So I know he has a jam-packed presentation, so get your notes ready. Certainly, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. When Matt is finished, we'll bring those questions to his attention. And also at the end, we'll put in a one-question questionnaire just for you to tell us if this presentation met your expectations. So thank you so much, Matt. I give the floor to you.
All right, thanks so much. How we doing, everyone? Hope we're doing well on this Tuesday morning. So as Monica mentioned, today we're going to be talking about WordPress and how to quote unquote do it all. Obviously, WordPress is a really expansive thing. There's a lot you can do with it and a lot of different ways of going about and utilizing it. And today I'm just going to talk to you about, some of my approaches that I've taken over the years when it comes to managing WordPress and a lot of the things that come along with it. And then, of course, as a website designer, a lot of the things that clients have asked me for and have had questions during trainings or just periodically through my relationships. So I'm hopeful that there might be something in here throughout the variety of things that we're going to cover that is going to be insightful and maybe something that's new for you. But yeah, let's get started. So of course, my name is Matt Smith, as you already know. I'm the digital media director at a company called Delin Design. We are a full service brand development and digital agency located in downtown Providence. I'm also the website designer of record for BNI CityBiz, which is a referral organization in Warwick. And I've been using WordPress for over 10 years now. It was surprising for me when I actually wrote that down in this presentation, but I've been using it for quite a while. And I, started off, knowing very little about it and experimenting and playing around. And I've learned quite a bit in that time. So hopefully I can pass some of that on to you today. So just a little bit of background about what I do. So Delin Design, as I mentioned, we are just a one-stop shop, a full service agency for a variety of needs. We've been in business for 24 years and we specialize in developing custom WordPress themes. So when I kind of got on board at the company, which was 8 years ago now, unbelievably, we were predominantly just brand development, graphic design, print. And over the years, we've kind of developed this, program for digital media related to asks for clients. And, in that time, there's been a lot of learning with, using WordPress and finding out how we can make it as easy to use for our clients as possible, how customized we can make it, all in the interest of serving our clients because, we're building websites for them, of course. So, their own experience utilizing it is really important to us. So we're going to talk about some of the things that I've learned, through those relationships over the years. So we're going to learn about quite a bit of stuff today, and I'm going to kind of go through this all fairly quickly in about the half an hour that we have. But I'm just going to touch on a variety of different topics that I'm asked often. You know, simple things as simple as, you know, managing different types of users and people that have access to WordPress if you're an administrative role, to being better organized with your files and your media library. Tips for backup and security, just to make sure that, you know, the site is secure and you're not going to run into any problems there. And also SEO and site optimization, how to keep things running smoothly and put yourself in the best position to pop up in search results. So let's get into user and file management. So say you're in a scenario where you're maybe just starting to, you've been tasked with managing the company website, which, you know, a lot of times can just fall suddenly onto someone's lap. I've seen it a lot over the years, and that's happened to me plenty of times. And managing all the different types of people who have access and what they can, you know, get in there and edit it can be daunting. So, you know, knowing what permissions you can apply to certain people, and also, you know, understanding what they're up to on the site, who's changing what is really important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and also just some tips for being organized as well, and keeping the back end of your site running nice and smoothly. So user roles, of course, there are a couple of them, but in the scenario that I described, you're more than likely going to be in an administrator role, which is essentially someone that has access to the site and can do pretty much whatever they like to it. They can create and edit and delete content, install new things like plugins. If they want to delete a user, change their permissions, this is the user category for you. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's likely that you're not going to want to make everybody an admin on your site. So if you're going through and maybe reevaluating what the users of your, the current users of your site are, and thinking about how you might want to reassign some roles, I think you want to consider what tasks they're going to be doing on a daily basis. So if it's somebody who's, you know, going to be tasked with coming up with new pages or generating a lot of content, versus someone who may be just a contributor, they're going to chip in or just do some proofreading or copy editing, things like that. So as based on the roles here, you can kind of see and think about how people might fit based on what those specific needs you're going to have for them are. And oftentimes this is going to be enough for you. You know, this is enough to just kind of get a good landscape of people on the site in terms of what they can be doing. But sometimes you do need a little bit more extra added specificity. So for something like that, I would actually recommend a plugin. It's called Advanced Access Manager, and this is just a screenshot of that. But sometimes
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Your slide is still in the first page. I don't know if you're trying to move your presentation.
Oh my
but
gosh!
You can only see the first one.
Going through it.
Yes.
Can you see this? You can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry about that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So did you see the slide just changed just now?
Yeah. So you're on user roles now.
Yes. Are you? So it says Advanced Access Manager in the top left. Can you see that?
No. I see user roles is in the top left. There we go. Advanced Access Manager plugins.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I went full screen. I guess the screen share didn't like that.
Okay.
Okay. So the Advanced Access Manager plugin. So this is a little bit of extra added emphasis when it comes to differentiating certain roles. So, you know, let's say you have an area on your site for posts, for blog posts. You have one for resources that you've created, and maybe one for news. You might have somebody who's contributing to your website that you only want them to have access to one of those. So the Advanced Access Manager plugin, which is a free plugin, gives you a little bit of extra added specificity when it comes to that stuff. So if your organization is a little bit more complex and you're out of the box users, this could be a good plugin to look into. There's a lot of customization options here. And speaking of staying organized, it's always everybody's goal, obviously, to, kind of fall into the category there on the right, which is, organized, clean, neat, easy to find things, especially if you have a lot of people, a lot of users on your site who are going to be, looking for image assets and PDF downloads and things like that. But based on what WordPress kind of gives you to start, you're looking more like what's on the left here. It's just kind of a big bin where everything goes. And, if you have a big site with a lot of images and assets, it can be cumbersome to keep track of all of it. So I want to recommend a plugin called Filebird. And you can just see a screenshot of that here. This is a great resource. It allows you to customize the look of the media library. If you're familiar with what that looks like, you can already see here on the left, there's a lot more categorization, which is really handy. Let's say you're part of an organization that has a team page and you have 20 to 30 team members on there. If you're trying to find that team member's photo, it can be really difficult. If you're trying to go through the big list that's just ordered based on what's the most recent one that you added. And although you can search, it can be difficult to find what you're looking for. So this plugin really gives you the benefit of having a better organizational method that can work for you. And it keeps everybody apprised of where things are hiding on your site. So the Filebird plugin is a good one to use for that. And also, when it comes to file management, I would also recommend this plugin, which is the Enable Media Replace plugin. For those of you that do know, let's say you have a report that you posted on your website, and it's something that maybe after 6 months to a year you want to update because there's been some copy changes or there's a new version of it. If you ever wanted to replace that file, you'd have to literally just upload a new one and replace, which is going to have a new website link, of course, to get to that new PDF. You'd have to go in and you have to replace every little place that linked to the old file, which can be hard to keep track of course. It'd be better if you could have something in place where you can literally just update the file, keep the links, set it and forget it, and be done with it. So WordPress doesn't do that natively, but this plugin allows you to do that. So the Enable Media Replace plugin, and you can see here, this is just a screenshot of it. So you can see here where the arrow is pointing near the bottom, there's a button that gets added to your standard media library. You don't really have to change anything else. You just have to click, upload a new file. Everything else is going to stay the same. Your URL on the right there, as well as your file name at the top. Just makes it a really easy, streamlined way to replace those files that you may have to update periodically. So let's talk about security and backups. So now more than ever, of course, as people are accessing the site from a lot of different places as we're working remotely, it's important to be up to date on some of this stuff. And you don't have to be a security expert to have some good safety measures in place just to make sure that people aren't going to be able to kind of force their way into your website. So I'm just going to cover a few ways that I think are nice out-of-the-box solutions that can be helpful for that. So a couple security plugins. These are three that I recommend that I've used fairly often, and that's WordFence, iTheme Security, and All-in-One Security and Firewall. You can look any of these up. They're free. They also have more premium versions with some added features. But what I found is for some of the more basic needs that you're going to have, these are all good plugins to do that. And when I say basic needs, I mean things like, if you were to, if someone were to be trying to access your site and what they call brute forcing their way in. So they're trying repeatedly over and over, and sometimes they even have the help of a tool or something to do it even faster. But if someone's trying to log into your site and they try 20 times in a row, it's probably likely that they don't belong in there and they can't get in for a reason. So plugins like this, are customizable, so you can set the amount of time someone has the ability to try before they're going to get locked out. So that's really helpful, and it also kind of gives you an idea that people are trying to find their way in. Another example too would be plugin vulnerability. So when you install plugins in WordPress, just like apps on your phone, they require updates, pretty frequently, and for the same reasons as you have phone app updates, and that's because over time, when features are added and things are moved around, there are sometimes gaps where people can find their way into exploiting something on your website. So these plugins do a good job of letting you know when some of those apps have updates or noted vulnerabilities, so that you can be apprised of when it's time to look into something like that on your website. So it's just a couple of use cases, but ones that I think are really helpful. And you can look up any of these plugins and learn a little bit more about the specifics and find out what's going to be right for you. And then so outside of just the security, and it's important to be prepared in the event that something does happen and your site goes down for some reason, whether it's because of an attack or just general act of God stuff. These things happen, so it's really important to have a backup prepared, just like a security, an insurance policy, for example. So this is a free plugin. It's called Updrafts Plus Backups. There's also a premium version of this as well with some added features. But this is a good plugin to basically just go in, set backup schedules, and you can customize this. It can be daily, weekly, monthly schedules, whatever makes sense for you. And it all runs in the background. It's set and forget. So if you do have an issue and you have to, and you can't get it resolved for some reason and you need to restore a backup, the plugin's going to have backdated versions of your website, and you can get it up pretty quickly. You also can customize it and back up certain files. If you have a lot of files on your site and you kind of want to just only focus on a couple of core things that are really going to be needed in the event that something happens, you can certainly do that as well. So there's a lot of backup plugins that are available. This is just one that I use pretty often, especially if you're trying to use something that's a free resource. But Updrafts Backup, it's a great resource for that. And I do want to talk to you about one other thing, and that is a service called Managed WP. And Managed WP was actually recently brought on to GoDaddy's suite of services, although you don't have to have a GoDaddy website to use it. But Managed WP is basically just like WordPress. It's a dashboard for your WordPress in some ways. It pretty much gives you some insight into all the things that are going on in your site, whether it's the plugins you have installed to other added features that you can make use of. And a lot of these are free. They do have some premium upgrades as well, but they're very inexpensive. I'm talking the difference between $1 or $2 for each one that you sign up for each month, which you can cancel at any time, which is pretty nice. But you can manage all the things that I just mentioned as far as security from this one dashboard. So it's kind of an all-in-one solution. So you can set backup schedules similar to Updrafts, restore a previous version, clone your website as well if you were trying to set up a staging environment or migrate your website, for example. So this is a great resource for that. It also has something that's really great called uptime monitoring, which is basically just allowing the plugin to monitor the site and make sure that if it does go down, you're going to receive a notification about it, because I'm sure we've all been in a situation where somebody is going to send you a message or an email and say, hey, what's going on with the website? It's down, and it could have been down for hours and you would never know. So this is a good resource for that, just in terms of keeping you informed if there's a problem on your site. And of course, you have your backups together, in that event, which is also great. And then as far as security, it does handle that as well. It's a little bit more limited capacity, but for just simple needs like making sure there isn't malware on your site, making sure there are no noted plugin vulnerabilities, and just making sure you're not blacklisted for any particular reason by a search engine. doing some daily sweeps with this is a great thing for some of your peace of mind as well. So I'm going to get into SEO now, and full disclosure, I am not an SEO expert. It's the kind of thing that, certain studios, that's the only thing that they specialize in, is just SEO. But by virtue of, being a site designer and being tasked to do these kind of things all the time, I know enough where I feel like I'm confident enough to talk about it, or at least enough to give you some good, helpful tips that I've learned over the years. So we're going to talk a little bit about some things you can do that will help your SEO on your site. And if you're not using any of these methods already, I think you should be seeing a pretty significant bump. So 3 quick tips I would recommend would be to make sure that all of your page meta information is customized based on the content of your pages. And I'll go into each one of these, of course, a little bit, including an XML sitemap, which is basically just a description of all the pages that exist and posts and images and whatnot for search engines, and optimizing the site as well for quick browsing, especially now in the digital age where everyone has a computer in their pocket. It's really important your site is going to be able to load quickly and be optimized for smaller screens. So I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with this, but if you're not, this is the plugin to go to for SEO management on WordPress. It's called Yoast. And this is the free version, which gives you pretty much everything you would need. But as with a lot of the other plugins I described, there is a premium version as well, which has some added bells and whistles, which are pretty nice. But the Yoast SEO plugin, it gives you the ability to accomplish, all of those things that I had mentioned, which is really great. And I'll go into some of those. So the biggest SEO thing I will say on WordPress, and this happens from time to time, but the most important thing is to make sure that in your reading settings in WordPress that this box is unchecked, because no matter what you're doing to set up yourself to be in a good standing with your SEO for search engines, if that box is checked, it's not going to matter, because it's basically going to be your website telling search engines, don't come in here, don't look at all of my stuff. I don't want to be indexed. I don't want you looking at all this, which is usually something you don't want. So do yourself a favor. If you haven't ever looked at this, just make sure that that box is unchecked so search engines can check you out. But so getting back into Yoast, I talked a little bit about meta information. So meta information is basically the stuff that you see when you're Googling your website, for example. So the page title and the description. These are really important because it gives the not only the search engine some context as far as what the site is about, but if you're ever Googling somebody or you're trying to find a resource that you're looking for a certain task you may have, you're going to want it to be descriptive and tell a little bit of the story of who you are and what you do on a page-by-page basis. So the Yoast plugin allows you to edit this information, which is really important, on a page-by-page basis, which is great. And there's lots of strategies, of course, for customizing this to stand out better. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure it's descriptive. It describes your unique value, and try to corner the market as best you can on the things that you would think someone would be Googling you for. So in for Dell and Design, it could be something to the effect of design studios in Rhode Island, and you'd want to make sure you kind of pepper that throughout your site. It also gives you some really good tips to improve your SEO on each page. So it gives you a lot of things to consider. And just because there's a lot here doesn't mean you necessarily have to make sure all of this is green. But at the end of the day, it gives you some good insight into some of the areas you may be lacking, as well as some tips to improve them. So I talked a little about the XML sitemap. So the sitemap is basically an index of all the files that you have on your site. It's kind of the roadmap for a search engine to understand the full breadth of pages and content you have available. So when you make it, obviously when you give somebody a map, it makes it easier for them to get to point A to point B. And we want to do everything we can, of course, to have good SEO to make the lives of the search engines easy. So having this in place, which is just something just by installing the plugin, is going to be really helpful. And it's the kind of thing that you can customize it. Sometimes there's areas of the site or particular things you don't want appearing in search results. So you can kind of cater that as well and make sure that it's finding all of the relevant things that you find important. So just to round out the SEO piece before I get into my last section here, like I said, it's all really about content. An SEO expert could go on for days about, content strategy and how to, come up with a good keyword strategy and things like that. But I think, if you just make sure that you're considering not only the quantity of the content, but the quality, you should be in good shape. So think about the unique value that your business or your site is filling a need for, and try to make sure that you're doing your best to bolster that across your site. So that comes through identifying those key phrases, as I mentioned, making sure you use image alt tags. So a search engine, can't exactly figure out what an image represents, but if you do, visually that is, but if you do include what's called an alt tag, which you can edit any of those in the media library section on your site, it gives a little bit of added context, which is going to boost your rankings there. Including a lot of links, both inbound and outbound, meaning if you have a page on your site that has a lot of links to other areas on your site that you might want to connect somebody to, or just linking to external sites, again, doing this with reason and not just throwing them in there haphazardly. That helps to develop a little bit of a good reputation with the search engines, because it understands kind of the broader context of the value of what your site is about. And then lastly, using Google Search Console. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's basically a tool that Google has that pretty much just tells you all of the pages it's able to find on your site and any 404 errors or issues that it finds. So knowing what those are and finding that there are pages that don't work or aren't connected well, and then being able to fix them is going to increase your score as well. And then so the last piece I want to get into is website customization or optimization, I should say. And as I mentioned, making sure your website is optimized and loads fast and is going to be quick to load on a phone, for example, is really important for SEO, because Google really values that. And I think it gets faster all the time, but I think the expectation nowadays is that a website is supposed to load in about 3 seconds or less. So understanding, where you are and what that baseline is, and then employing some of these tips I'm going to give you, you should be able to kind of see an improvement there. So establishing a baseline. So, it's more than just going to the site now and, counting out to yourself how long it takes to load. I think, you need to kind of run a test. So this is a free tool that's out there. It's called GTmetrix. And you can type in any website on there and you can basically just put it through a speed test. And it's going to look at a lot of different things, such as how long it takes to load, and citing any issues that could impact that score. And it gives you a rating. So this is the Dell Design site. B's not something I'm tremendously proud of. I'd always love them to be A's, but the scores are very tough on these. But it gives you an idea of how long it takes for it to load, and then it gives you some tips and recommendations to improve some of those things. Now, if you click any of those recommendations, it will give you a little bit more context, which is helpful, but you're not always going to be able to fix some of this stuff if you're not a developer, of course. But I'm going to give you a couple things which are, commonly used tools that can help to fix some of those issues that usually pop up. So as far as optimization is concerned, these are some things that I would recommend. Minifying your site files, which is basically just pretty much crushing and compressing some of those files down, stripping out any information that the browser does not need so that it can be read as quickly as possible. And I'll show you some plugins that I would recommend for that. Using a caching solution. So caching, it's not like storing a cookie on your browser, but it is storing information like images or some of those files that I mentioned before, so that if someone's visiting the site, and they've already loaded the header and the logo and all the things that are there, if they go to another page, you don't want to have to reload all that stuff again. This just kind of keeps all of that in place on the browser so that as you continue to browse, you're not reloading all these assets, and it speeds up your site, which is really helpful. Removing any unused plugins is just like cleaning out your closet. You're always going to be a little bit better organized and efficient if you do that. So if you do have any extra stuff you just don't need in there, you can feel free to get rid of that. And of course, you can always do a backup beforehand if you are worried about deleting anything. And then I would recommend the Smush plugin. So it's a free plugin. You can look it up. It's basically a resource that will crush down your images. And I'm not talking about the quality of them, but extra stuff that's in there behind the scenes that you don't see. It kind of strips that stuff out, and it can really optimize the file size for all of those images on your site. So it's a really great tool. So I talked a little bit about minifying. So these are 3 minification plugins I would suggest, and you can look these up and understand some of the, the details and differences between them. But at the end of the day, they all do a good job, and they all are free. And these are pretty much set and forget. You don't need to be a coder to use these. It pretty much will go in and just take all those files and then have another version of them that's crushed down that the browser would use, and it's going to speed up the amount of time it takes for the browser to read all that information. So these are 3 really good resources for that. And then lastly, caching, 3 other examples that I would recommend for these. Similar plugins overall, but these are all really highly rated. They are all free, and I've used all of them at various points in my career and sites that I've worked on, and they work really well for page caching as well. So that's what I got for you. I know I covered a lot in a quick amount of time, but hopefully this gives you some good info to consider. And yeah, thanks everyone for your time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Matt. And when we said it was chock full of information, I hope people started with legal pads. So like writing, you gave us so many good tools to look at. And I'm sure like the GT metrics, I'm sure people will be like, let me just see, are we faster? Are we better than?
Yes.
So that was great. Is there anyone in the room that has any questions for Matt? If you want to post that in the meeting chat box. We have one, what do you think about Visual Composer?
Yeah, so, Visual Composer and other kind of drag and drop editors, we'll just call them, are great. They're really handy for people. And like WordPress has its own version called Gutenberg now, which from the developer community has some mixed reviews. But, when you think about having something in place that's as easy as possible for you to build pages, it's a great tool for that. And people, of course, are visual themselves, just natively. So, being able to really drag and drop and customize that stuff without having someone to develop, page templates and themes is a great thing. I think the thing that I find is that works for some people and it doesn't work for others. And where it can get tricky is if you have a lot of variety, a lot of different types of pages, and they all look kind of different because different people have been building them. And then you get into, does this feel like our brand? Is this really connecting? Is it confusing at this point? So, I mentioned the whole great power, great responsibility thing before. It kind of falls into that category for me. And it's a great tool, but, like all of them, it's got to be used well.
Okay, thank you. I do not see any other questions at the moment in the chat box. So I just would encourage folks, there's just that one question I had posted from SurveyMonkey. It just helps us kind of plan and predict what we're looking to do in the future. So Matt, thank you so much for putting this awesome presentation together, for Creosa for getting us all in the right virtual room. We appreciate it. And Chris Hughes from Bridge is on this call. Thank you to Chris as well for introducing us to Matt. Certainly a lot of good information that's been imparted today. So thank you all. And thank you all for coming. We look forward to having you at another event.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you guys for having me.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Matthew.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.